The Journey to Parenthood. Chapter 2. Cheer Up and Dry Your Damp Eyes. By SolidFerret. Now, Button, it's your first day of school here, so I expect you to be nice. If some pony comes up to you and says hi, what do you say back? Hi. Button answered with an annoying groan as his mom walked him along the roads of Ponyville. The family had recently moved to the town away from Canterlot. The parents thought it would be best if the kids had a little more of a quiet life, and somewhere that was more kid-friendly than the busy lifestyle most ponies in Canterlot have. It had been around 2 weeks since they moved in. Button had barely gone outside, save to find the arcade that he was told was there. Now, his mother was walking with her son to his first day of school. She had been a tad cranky after he thought school started yesterday, only to yell that it was a Sunday, leaving Button with one last day to himself. For some reason, he still doesn't know why his toy train randomly burst into flames. But now that the day was here, Button's mind changed when he realized it was hours away from his video games. Plus his homework would also get in the way. He trudged to the path, his mother by his side. "Mom," he suddenly spoke. "What is it, sweetie?" she asked, looking down at him. "Do you think I'll make any friends?" he asked. The two stopped in front of the school entrance. Several colts and fillies used their time to play with friends before the bell rang. Button's mom pulled her son into a hug, which is gratefully returned. He struggled to hold back tears. "You'll be fine, son. I promise," she told him before giving him a quick kiss on the forehead. Button knew if he spoke, he'd start crying, just like he did this morning before they left home. His mom waved goodbye as he walked up the schoolyard path, avoiding glances from what would be his new classmates. He looked around to see a place to sit and wait until class started. He stopped under a tree and turned to see a sight that broke his young heart. His mother walked away from the school, leaving him there. At this point, only his mother was the only one by his side, and she left. Button failed to contain his tears. He had held up all the way here and began to cry. To the others in school, it was common to see somebody on their first day cry for their mommy. Not even Diamond Tiara could argue without being reminded of how much of the sobbing mess she was on her first day. But for three friends, they made to see it that they would cheer up any sad foal. "What would a cutie mark be cheering up look like?" Scootaloo asked. Applebloom looked over to the colts in his puddle of tears. "Well, we can't wait to find out, can we, girls?" "Nope," Scootaloo responded. "What says you, Sweetie Belle?" The two looked around, not seeing her friend near them. "Sweetie Belle?" Scootaloo looked around until Applebloom turned her head towards where the crying colt was. They watched as Sweetie Belle introduced herself to the colt, asking for his name, and after hearing his story, giving him a hug and asking if he would like to hang out with her friends. "Huh. Not bad," Scootaloo commented. "How sweet," Applebloom said. They could already tell that Sweetie Belle had made a new friend. Button Mash woke up before the sun was up. The room was still dark and encouraged him to close his eyes and go back to sleep. The warmth of the makeshift bed on the floor was far too comfortable to leave. Plus his wife had her hooves around his neck. The second they barely rose over the horizon, making the room still dark, Button heard little to no sound in the boutique in the early hours of the morning. He looked over to his sleeping wife, who breathed softly in her sleep. Button recalled the day he asked her to marry him, when she burst into tears and could barely speak, let alone accept his proposal. Rarity had given the young man the encouragement he needed to pop the question at one of the Pinky's parties. Upon seeing it, Rarity herself burst into tears, while Pinky was so excited that she extended the party even more. The two always enjoyed remembering the highlights of their relationship, to remind themselves why they love each other so much. Button sniffed, and the scent of coffee filled his nose. He looked over to see Rarity up about this early. She paid no attention to the two as they went about making breakfast, most likely for her and Spike. Snuggling up to his wife, Button ignored Rarity and closed his eyes, wanting to sleep more on his last day off before he went back to work. Rarity poured herself a fresh coffee, taking the scent in as it filled the kitchen, relaxing her a little as she added sugar and creamer and mixed in with a spoon, using her magic while she went over to the fridge. Button could no longer ignore the noisy Rarity was making and opened his eye. The smell of coffee was calling his name, and looked up at Rarity as she read a fashion magazine and sipped her drink. She eventually looked back at him his eyes half closed and his mane messy, and said to him, "Good morning," she said in a soft tone, not to wake her sister. Button was too sleepy to respond, and only blinked his eyes. Button tried to drown the sound out, but to no avail, as he buried his head in the pillow. He only groaned and rubbed his head a little. "Bring me," he moaned weakly. "Don't worry, dear," Rarity said as she got up out of her seat. "I planned to have some for you two anyhow." The sound of coffee poured was heard, followed by hoofsteps that stopped by Button's head as he poked up to see a cup of coffee floating down right by him. Taking it, he blew on it to cool it off, before taking a sip and get the taste of morning breath out of his mouth. Tasting the lack of sugar and forced it down. "Sorry, dearie. I know you like sugar." Rarity took the cup and went over to put in the sugar. Button turned over, the hoof around him not moving as he buried. He looked back at Sweetie Belle, sleeping peacefully. She breathed softly, and Button felt even warmer next to her. He felt this when he had to stay the night here, one night when the rain came down harder than it was supposed to, due to a cross-eyed mare's mistake. It had only been a few days since Button had met Sweetie Belle. Rarity called and confirmed that Button was at her home and that his mother need not to worry. That wasn't enough to stop him from crying for his mom, which Sweetie Belle held him as he cried like a baby. She figured that she was probably the most important pony in his life at the time and actually felt bad for him. She calmed him down and the two slept there the night together. However, Rarity forbid it to have Button spend the night after the Christmas party when Sweetie Belle kissed him under the mistletoe. The memories flowed as Button leaned over and kissed Sweetie Belle on the lips, making her smile in her sleep. Button Mash held her head close to his, and he closed his eyes. From above, Rarity watched the two and grinned. "You two will make great parents," she said as she sipped the cup of coffee she was meaning to bring to Button.
"And now for something completely different."
"Sweetie Belle?" Squeedaloo. Plus his wife had her head... The memories flowed as Button leaned over and I almost said the quist. As Button quist Sweetie Belle.